Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about non-combat oriented games.
Something like that, yes. Non-combat games.
He gave me that title or that idea, and then he told me 3 games to look up, and I watched a live play on one of them.
Wow.
A virtual play? Live play? Actual play. And there was combat.
Oh.
But it wasn't the center of
My mistake.
Of attention.
What was that one called? The one you actually saw the actual play of?
Monster Hearts.
Monster Hearts 2?
2, yes.
2. I think there's a...
I also watched a actual play, but I couldn't watch all of it because I didn't like it. Primetime Adventures was the second one.
Ah, yes.
And the third one, I didn't get to watch an actual play. It's called Golden Skies Stories. Golden Sky Stories.
Well, I just kind of picked those out of the hat. There's a ton more games out there that do not rely heavily on combat as the central focus of their games, of the game. For example, like D&D, maybe even Star Trek Adventures.
I knew you were going to go there. D&D.
Well,
always gets a bad rap for its...
I'm not saying it's a bad rap. I'm just saying that when... and people have been highlighting this about D&D and other games of that type. More like, simulation and traditional type role-playing games is when a certain percentage of... When the preponderance of the rules have to do with combat, that kind of tells you that it's kind of combat-orientated.
I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, you can play a D&D game that's investigative. You've run us through murder where there was a murder and we were trying to solve it.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of fighting.
Right.
Until you had to try to bring in the bad guy.
Bring in the bad dude.
Who wasn't cooperating and that kind of stuff, right? So then there was fighting.
They usually don't want to cooperate.
But we spent hours just investigating stuff. So
I'm not saying it can't be done, but like they say, it's just that the rules are meant for a lot of combat, seemingly.
The rules for combat are more complicated than any of the rules for the 3 games that you had me look at.
I could throw out some of the games like Tales from the Loop is not centered around combat.
So when he said non-combat games, I was thinking, there's not going to be any combat, but that's not necessarily true. Except in Golden Skies Stories, there's no combat.
Well, there is, but you pay a price if you win.
Oh, see, that's bad.
You have to apologize and your character cries because they've done a bad thing.
These are some very interesting games, I got to tell you.
So we did pick, okay, so the ones we picked are Monster Hearts 2, or I picked. I know it's we. And Primetime Adventures and Golden Sky Stories. There are a wide variety of games. All of these come from independent producers or publishers, writers. And let's get into it, right? Monster Hearts.
Monster Hearts is powered by Apocalypse World.
Right. What is it about? It's about teenagers in high school having their teenage type of problems. Who's going to take them to the prom? Who doesn't like them? And sometimes even more deeper situations or more personal situations. But on top of that, you're a monster, right?
I feel conflicted when they say you're a monster because being a vampire doesn't necessarily mean you're a monster, if that's what you are, right?
I think that pretty much is the definition of a monster.
But somebody turns you into a vampire. It's not like you're born that way.
Right.
Somebody turns you into a werewolf. It's not like you're born that way. Now, the witch is in there. That's a choice.
So, like all post-apocalyptic apocalypse world games, they have characters which are represented or playlists represent characters.
I'm sorry, playlist?
Playlist? No, it's not a playlist.
That's what you said.
What are they called? So, in Apocalypse World, characters are called playbooks, the different types of characters you are. And for the most part, because Apocalypse World is originally so open, you can have tons of playbooks. So a ton of different types of characters. And the characters are just really simple kinds of, there's not too much to them, right? They have a problem, they have certain things that they're good at, probably 2 or 3 skills, and everything else is handled by role playing.
And to resolve conflicts or to see if you make your rolls, it's 2 6-sided dice.
Yeah, 2d6.
2d6. I used to think that 2d6 were not cool because there were all the other dice, but I kind of like 2d6 resolution because it makes it so simple. And if you get a 7 is the number, then you succeed.
Well, there's different levels of success. I think if you get like an 8 or 9, depending on the game, you succeed, and then you can succeed, but have a complication or something like that.
Well, it was 7 in the one that I was watching.
7.
If you got a 7, you succeeded. If you didn't succeed, and the GM, who they call the MC,
that's right.
they because they kind of treat it as a cut to the next scene kind of thing. So it's more like which I find interesting. I kind of like it in a way that instead of traveling to the town and it takes 3 days, you just cut to the next scene and there you are, right? So it's more like a movie or something.
Right. But
so if you don't succeed, you check a box that makes you get closer to your dark side.
Oh.
So, and the dark side is your monster abilities.
Right.
Or whatever. It was very interesting, but the main part of the game or the main part of the characters is they have strings to each other.
Connections, right?
So they call them strings in this one.
Okay.
And however many strings you have on that person gives you advantages to them. But during the game, you can attach strings, you can cut strings, and all kinds of different things like that. So it was very... I found it hilarious because I was like, Saul and I have talked about Monster Hearts and read stuff about it before.
Right.
But I found an actual play to watch and I was laughing because it was so funny. And
yeah, I was running. I wasn't running a game, but I was in a game online. Behind me, she was cackling and laughing. I'm like, what is she doing? I thought she was watching a movie like on her tablet, but then I saw that she was obviously looked like an actual play because you see the little screens of the different people, like a Zoom meeting, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what she's watching. So at one point we took a break and I asked her what she was watching. She said Monster Hearts 2. I go, oh wow, she must like it. What's going on? I did watch some of it, and the people who were playing were very amicable. They were just really gregarious type people.
They were really good role players for one.
That too.
But they were totally hilarious too because they were in and out of character. You know how role playing games go, and it's nice to watch actual plays where you see the people are exactly like the people sitting around your table, right? Or your friends on Zoom that you're playing with, right? They're in character, and then they stop, they pop out of character to ask you a question or say, I think I should do it this way. What do you think? How should it go? Or, that kind of thing. And would it be better if I did this? Or what does this rule really mean when I'm reading it? So I always find that interesting to see in actual plays about.
Right. Instead of like, they do that a little bit in like Critical Role, but for the most part, because they're professional actors, they tend to stay in character longer. They still crack jokes and stuff, but this one, you're right, they would quickly fall out of character and try to understand which was the best way to go about doing the scene.
What would make the scene better?
Yes.
Which I thought it was interesting, but if you think about it, it's really metagaming, but in a different way than when you're playing D&D and someone's like, well, okay, stop. If this happens, then this is going to happen, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it's totally different from that, actually, that happening. So we've described this game, people have described this game, not us, that it can be very emotional game because a lot of people had a tough time in high school. And even in the actual play that you were watching, I think it really cemented this idea that everybody had a different experience in high school.
Yeah.
Because like at one point they're talking about going to the prom or something.
To a dance. It was the winter dance.
Okay, the winter dance. And that a couple of the players were saying that they had to be careful because on the dance floor, because they had to be careful because of the mat.
The tarp.
The tarp.
They said tarp.
That they had put down. And then the other two players are going, what are they talking about tarp? So they fell out of character and they're like, what are you talking about a tarp for?
What kind of dance floor were you on?
And then they go on and talk about how they were in the gym or basketball.
The two people that said that were talking about how you had to put a tarp down so you didn't mess up the basketball floor. And the other people are like looking at them like they're totally crazy, going, what are you talking about? And they're all, well, I guess you didn't have good basketball teams. And the
And
other people are like,
yeah,
oh, yeah, okay.
They weren't that good. And then like they had a dance in the mall.
Yeah, they had their prom in the mall, and she was from the Midwest.
Okay.
She's like, that's what we did. And everybody's like going, what? And she goes, yeah, it was a mall, the center fountain. And then they have the places that go out to the shops. And it was all set up. And they were like, okay, that's weird.
Well, what's funny is that perfectly describes my old mall in Salinas, the Northridge Mall. It was like it was just a long mall, right? But at some point there was
the center of
it, and it had like a cross hallway that wasn't very long, but at the center, indeed, there was this very large fountain.
I think that everyone from small towns probably has a mall like that. So when she said that, I'm like, oh, that sounds like the mall in Chico. And I was like, okay. What the other people were like, okay. And one girl she says, well, I think LA is different than other places in the country. And I thought that was a very telling thing, right? Because you never know what kind of high school people went to.
Well, then one guy who was from the Midwest or something said he didn't even have
He said that they had their prom in the cafeteria of their school.
Oh, that's right.
Their basketball court was outside.
I thought that was funny. I've never seen we had basketball in grammar school. We had basketball courts outside.
It must have been from a small place.
Very small. So obviously everybody has a different experience in high school. Mine wasn't as traumatic as other people's, and of course I had problems. I had people trying to bully me and stuff, but I never got into a fight, so that was good. Not like I did in junior high, which I got in a couple fights, but luckily I won. But in high school, I was able to navigate the halls,
the social situation.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff I just avoided. I mean, I didn't hang out. There was definitely cliques in high school, and I don't think I was in any clique. That was my salvation, I guess. I wasn't a jock. I wasn't in academics. I wasn't in the people in government. I wasn't the ABS president and treasurer and those people. I guess I was in FFA, Future Farmers of America. But I was like a peripheral person, right? I didn't I did actually raise a pig, but other people raised cows and sheep and stuff. And I only did it 1 year, and I only did it my senior year because I want to get out of school for a week.
Depending on who's listening to this, most people go, isn't everybody in FFA?
Yeah. No.
Don't you want to take your cow and get it a ribbon at the county fair before they kill it?
Well, you get paid for it too. So obviously everybody's experience is different. Mine, for the most part, was pretty, 1970s version, even though I was in the 80s. It was a 1970s
Salinas is always 10 years behind everybody else.
For some reason, it was like 1970s version of Mayberry. So the 70s had problems, right? People were trying to do drugs at the time, and stuff like that. But for the most part, like I said, I didn't hang out with any real troublemakers. And
well, I think the most telling part of the actual play that I was watching was one of the girls said to the girl that was playing the witch, she's like, you're nice to her and then you're mean to her. She goes and she goes, and you keep doing that. And she goes, that's the way high school was. Your friends were nice to you and then they were mean to you. She goes, that's not how my high school was. And she goes, well, then I guess you weren't a popular girl in high school. She goes, that's right, I wasn't. And she goes, that's how these people acted. And I'm like going, and I was thinking, yeah, I saw those people, but I just stayed away from them.
Yeah. Well, and so I think it's a very learning experience about how everybody grows up differently, right?
But they didn't really emphasize, I mean, that was it wasn't a big emphasis in the game that was being played. So
yeah, they're hunting down a vampire.
They were hunting a vampire down
who stole somebody, right?
Yes,
or kidnapped, I should say.
Somebody who had disappeared, and the vampire in the group was like, well, she was at my party, and people are going to say that's the last place they saw her. And
one of the players was a vampire.
Yeah, and she's all, I need her to be found and be okay because I don't want to draw any attention to myself.
Now we see the crux of the biscuit, as they say.
So it was very interesting. It was nothing like what I had heard Monster Hearts was like. So I guess it depends on the group you're playing with.
Definitely.
And what issues they want to deal with. It was totally campy and hilarious.
Right. And it looked like they were having a lot of fun because they were constantly, Jolene was constantly laughing. And and the little bit that I saw, they were also, very jovial, and they were having fun and being typical role players.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's like I said, the resolution is super simple. It's 2d6. There's a target number. I thought it was 9, but you said 7.
Well, it was 7 in the game I was watching.
And then the only pluses you get are like you have like 3 skills or 3 things that you're good at, and as long as you can kind of say whatever you're trying to do is kind of related to those skills, you get +2 to the die.
And the werewolf was having a problem because it was during the day. And
that's right.
She only got pluses if if the moon was out.
Oh,
and so the MC kept saying, "Well,
the moon can be out during the day too. I've seen the moon."
That's what she tried to say, but the MC said no. The moon, you cannot see the moon. It is not time for the moon to be up yet. So, and it was going to be a full moon. So it was a.
Well, she just making sure she controlled the wolf inside of her. That's funny. No, I always thought about the same thing when I was a kid. But then I would see the moon during the day. And go, hey, what's going on here? But that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's an interesting game. Apocalypse World. For years and years, I really didn't like the idea behind the way it worked. But as they change, or they call it hack, or whatever you want to call it, they're just 2 different terms. One means one thing and the other means another. But basically, you can change the rules or apply a setting that you want. And some people had done that and written extensive rules and made Monster Hearts. And there's other games that are based on that system, and it looks very interesting now to me that because it's super.
Does
simple.
Apocalypse World have just a system book that says Apocalypse World?
Well, Apocalypse World is the name of it's a post-apocalyptic world, and originally
is that different than the World of Darkness?
Yes.
Okay, because that's the one that Steve plays. With the World of Darkness. So those okay.
That's Vampire the Masquerade and all that stuff.
Okay.
So. But I that was quite a while ago. But now, as I gotten older, you're right. 2d6, a simple resolution system sounds really appealing.
It was the problem. It was when we played Traveler that I was like 2d6 just is easy sometimes, because it's you can only get 12, and
let's just go.
Yes, but then there's just you have to meet a certain number. If you don't hit it, you try to add up whatever bonuses you have, and Traveler, you don't get that many bonuses, so you just have to make sure you make that number, and if you're not going to make the number, you don't succeed. It makes it easy.
Yeah. So we also played Liminal, which is 2d6 system, and I really enjoyed that game. I really like the way you can make a character in it, and but Apocalypse World, it's even easier to make a character. You get this playbook and it tells you this is your character. This is more or less the skills that you get, or they give you a choice. choose between these 5 skills.
Yeah,
and boom. And I remember the one we played, the characters were on literally on bookmarks. So the guy was rifled, and he had she had a pile of characters. And he goes, and it was like 150 characters in the pile. She goes, well, just pick one. But Apocalypse World is about the end of the world, and basically it's about the end of the world, and it's very. To me, the setting that I got was very like Mad Max. That was the kind of setting that it was, right? That's Monster Hearts, I think. Another couple of comments that they made were that I've seen made about the game is that you probably have to be older to appreciate or wanting to go back to high school.
I think so. Well, one of the themes of this game is that it has a lot to do with, because in high school you're learning about your sexuality and stuff, right? So a lot of it has to do with sexual tension, right? And it had one of the when I was reading about, reviews of this, they were talking about how it had to do with, it's a very LGBT friendly kind of game.
Right.
There were 4 girls and 1 guy in the actual play that I was watching. So they were, talking about how the werewolf was a girl and she really liked the vampire who was a girl. So that was a theme throughout the whole thing. It was very interesting, and it was one of the strings that people had attached to each other.
Yeah, I think some of the things that turned me off it was the sex move idea, because you could do the sex move, which I guess is try to influence another person, right? And I'm like, and I go, well, that's kind of a weird moniker for a skill or for an attempt. But it's just
to try to. It wasn't called a sex move. It was called to turn somebody on.
Right. Well, in that game,
yeah.
I forget what game that actually is called sex move. I think it's probably Apocalypse World. I think originally. So they probably changed it to turn somebody on, right? And that to me seems a little bit more palatable to me. I guess I'm puritanical, I guess. And but I think the game plays really neatly. It's real simple, the mechanics of it, and a lot of it is player focused, right? I mean, the players have to drive the story, as the GM kind of doesn't have as much control of the game, right?
Well, they do. I mean, the werewolf wanted to do werewolf. He wanted the pluses for being a werewolf, and the GM said no, the move's not out. I mean, they still have the power.
Yeah, that's true.
To contain the players from going totally crazy and doing whatever they want.
That's true. So if it appeals to you, Monster Hearts is a good light rules game, heavily based on storytelling. Simple to set up. And you make up the school or the setting ahead of time?
Yeah, you make up the setting.
Right. Before you start the game. It's a very rules light and heavy in the storytelling. I think a lot of people like it because of those elements. And playing a monster who can lose control of themselves is kind of like having to deal with teenage anger issues and teenage angst and emotions and stuff. So that's Monster Hearts 2.
And then the next one was called Primetime Adventures.
Primetime Adventures.
Which is a very interesting, kind of strange. It was very strange to read about it and then to watch the actual play.
Right. So Primetime Adventures is a super light game, just like Monster Hearts. Not based on Apocalypse World, but has its own system.
It was created by Matt Wilson of Dog-Eared Designs.
Yes. And it's like a really small book, like 78 pages. It's a smaller, it's not the 8.5 by 11 size. It's more like the digest size, or A5, A7. I don't know what the size is. It's about running a TV show.
Yes, the GM is called a producer.
Sounds good. And like I said, the rules are really light, and the players, I think in this game, a lot of the reviews I read and from the rules themselves, it seems like the players really have to buy into this whole idea of putting on this TV show and how it's really player driven and really a story driven game, right? Because there's really no combat in this game.
There's conflict resolution.
Yes.
And the first edition used dice, but then after that you use
switch the cards.
Yeah, and it's drawing 3 cards, and whoever has the most red cards wins.
Right.
The conflict.
And you get bonuses for having skills or something that is related to whatever the conflict you're trying to achieve. And that's right. It's all that's it. That's all that matters, is that the color of the cards. If you have more, then you basically get your way.
Yeah, you have a certain amount of points to put into your traits. You get like,
I think it's 8.
It's traits and 5 traits. You got half of them are between edges, knowledge, abilities of history, something like that, and connections, key supporting characters. So that means that your traits. A lot of the traits are called weird things, like, but it was interesting. So it's basically just you have 2 traits that you put together, or you use your trait, and then you tell them why you're doing it.
Right.
You're going to resolve the conflict with cards. So
right. I remember that this is a game about putting on a TV show. So it's very tightly controlled about that's what you're doing.
Yes.
Right.
And I like one of the articles I read. It says it takes a lot of the pressure off of the GM, who's called the producer, because he'll say, okay, then in the next scene, we're going to drive the plot forward. I want you and you to do this scene at the bottom of the bridge, that kind of thing, right? And then the people just go, whatever the story is about.
A lot of it, I remember reading it and looking at the rules. It was very, what is it? You needed that session zero, right?
Yes.
Because you got to have what the show's about, whether it's a police procedural.
Yes. The actual play that I tried to watch was about a hospital.
Yes.
And once again, it was a hospital where weird things were happening, right? Like, because in the community, I guess somebody got eaten by a bear. But the hospital, what do you want to call him? The runner of the hospital, the person who runs it, the administrator, wanted to he didn't want the people in the media to say that the person was eaten by a bear. So he had one of the doctors go and talk to the
press,
the medical examiner in the morgue, and explain to her how the report needed to be written.
Oh, wow.
Right. So it was I'm all, okay, so it's like, and they cut from one scene to the next scene, and so it's basically like, and it says each season is between 1 and 9 episodes. So I don't know how many episodes you would do in one get together. Maybe you're doing a show for you're going to have 9 episodes, so you're going to play 9 times.
Right. I think that's how it is. And it's very, it's tightly coordinated, right? In the sense that you have these seasons, you have these episodes. And the fact that, like you said, the producer just sets the scene kind of like, and then the players, they're on their own, right? As to what they're going to do, what they're making.
Yeah, they don't have there's not an actual script. They have to make it up as they go along. So that's the storytelling part, right?
Right. And they have a ability to add anything they want to the story.
Yeah, I stopped watching the actual play that I was watching because I didn't like it. I was like, I didn't like it was just a little too weird for me, the people that were playing in it. Not that they were weird, but the way that they were doing the cut to the scenes and because I was thinking that I grew up watching TV shows, right? And in the 80s and 90s when that was, I guess it still is, but it's a little bit different now. But so like if you're doing a hospital, it was kind of like General Hospital, right? Yeah. So it was
like St. Elsewhere.
It was, and there were the strings or connections they called them, where some people, one actor like the other actor, that kind of thing. Offset, right? Versus on-set. Right. So it was very interesting, but I didn't like the one that I was watching. So I just need to find a different one to see the way the people are doing it.
Right. And the thing is that because you need to have that session zero and to map out what the game is going to be about, and everybody, has to agree on what the game is going to be about. You don't want somebody sitting out or playing that wanted a different type of game, right?
Yeah.
Like if you said there was somebody they're doing like a supernatural show.
I saw a supernatural one. I saw or one of the people, they were in their session zero, and they were talking about one guy wanted to do an anime kind of show. Okay. And some of the other people were like, "No, I don't really want to do anime. Can we think about something else?" So So they kind of had to hash out what they were going to do. So you can do anything from like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Gilmore Girls.
Right. There's a few examples of how or what kind of movies or shows that you want to do in the book, even though it's only 78 pages, because the rules are so light. There's a lot of examples of like a comedy show. I forget I forget. There's a show that they use as an example. But like they're talking about Friends and the Gilmore Girls, another one is that shows up, and then you can go the opposite way with like Firefly and just basically any kind of show you can imagine. Obviously, that's the kind of show that you could put on in this role playing game, and a lot of it has to do with screen presence. The more screen presence you have,
which is how much time you have
right on the screen.
Yeah,
and the range numbers. I forget what the number of that. How much screen presence you can have, but I think it's very interesting.
It's 1 to 3.
I think it's a very interesting set of rules. I think what's really appealing about this is that it can handle any genre that you want to play in.
I think the only thing that I thought when I was reading about it and stuff is that like the boys, the 18-year-olds and the 21-year-old that we play with a lot.
Yeah.
They have grown up in a totally different TV kind of thing. They watch stuff on YouTube or they watch Netflix with their friends. So they do see some shows. But like Augustine watches, he watched what was it? Oh, my brain stopped for a second. Right now he's watching Call Saul. What's it called?
Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul. And then he watched the one with the drug dealer guy that was making drugs.
Oh, yeah.
So the kind of shows that they might think are appealing may not appeal to other people. So you really have to kind of go with the people you're playing with and make sure that they really want to buy into whatever show you're creating.
Right. Because, and even my son and his friends, I'm not sure they would enjoy this pretty much pure storytelling game.
Yeah.
Because they're really into that.
They really like rules and figuring stuff out.
Right. That tactical, all these pluses and minuses. And I read a review of people saying that people who are really into mini maximizing and counting squares and all that, probably this wouldn't appeal to them. But you never know. I think just saying things like that, not giving people a chance, they might like it because they may never.
That's what I meant by you need to make sure if you're going to do it with people who may not be into whatever you're liking. Like the one guy really wanted to do anime, and the other people in the room were like, I really don't want to do anime. So, but that might appeal to an 18-year-old because they've seen a lot of animes, right?
Right.
But it wouldn't appeal to someone who's like, oh, I really am not into that, right?
Right.
So you have to make sure the whole room is into whatever you're doing.
Right. And that's a good thing about that session 0 in this game and for almost any game. But in this game, it definitely has to happen. And it definitely has to be the whole table. All the players have to agree.
Well, because before you can create the show, the actors have to be into it, right? The producer can't say, okay, today we're going to do a show about blah, blah, blah. And everyone's all, I don't want to do that.
No. Right. So it's a very interesting game. A lot of people have really liked it. They like the super rules light. They like the idea of it's really story driven, and the fact that they can play almost any game. I mean, any show that they really like on TV that they've ever seen. So that's pretty cool.
Or not the actual show, but something like it.
Right. So on to Golden Sky Stories.
Golden Sky Stories.
So this is I think this is an actual Japanese game that's been translated into English. It just drips that way, but maybe it's not. I didn't look at who the author was. But Golden Sky Stories is where you play a spirit, usually a spirit animal, that can transform and shapeshift into humans even. And it's about making connections. That's how you that's what you're trying to do, and it's really a pure storytelling game. There is very little in the way of stats. So in this game, if you have the mechanic of this game is if you have a higher number in the skill than the person who's opposing it, you win. That's all there is to it. And you're trying to make connections with people, and basically this game is about telling heartwarming stories, right? And the way this showcases the fact is that violence is very looked down upon. In fact, it's almost prohibited in this game because if you do get into a fight, and I use my air quotes that you can't see on a podcast, is you actually end up,
there's consequences.
Yeah, you end up having consequences. The consequences is that you have to apologize to whoever you defeated or whoever you fought with, and you lose connections, which is what you're trying to achieve is by making more connections.
Yes. The original game was published in Japan by Yuyaki Koyake. And I'm sorry if I butcher the name, but that's the best I can do. It was translated into English. You're playing animal spirits, right? Or some kind of spirits that inhabit usually animals.
Oh, yeah.
And they have magical powers,
right?
And they have the ability to take on temporary human form,
right?
And there's usually a magical village or a village that's enchanted, an enchanted town, whatever.
Right.
And the players attempt to solve problems by ingenuity, cooperation, and friendship.
Yes, I mean it's really comes out of a different angle, right? And I have my notes here. It's great for storytelling, simple short stories, and due to the fact that the rules are so almost non-existent, it's easy to tell a story unhampered by the mechanics of the game. You don't have to like look up a rule to see, the mechanics are so simple. There's no need to look up a rule because it's just a number that your character has, and if your number is higher than the opposing thing, whether it's another NPC or even another character to decide, who gets their way, then the person with the highest number wins. There's no dice rolling, there's no cards. It's super simple. So what happens is that it kind of happens organically, right? When you are playing with other people and you're trying to solve these things, and the GM says this is going to take a certain number to win or to get your way, the players already know what they have at their disposal.
Okay.
And it's just this. It seems just this really kind-hearted type of game. I think a lot of people who just want to step out of this combat-orientated games, like, well, I'm gonna say D&D, but other heavier games where there's explosions and gunfire. No, there's none of that here. There's just you're just trying to solve this villagers' problems. Like this one guy says, I saw this actual play where, and it was a simple one. I mean, it wasn't even that difficult. He was gonna propose to his wife, but he dropped his ring in the lake. So the spirit animals heard this guy lamenting what had happened, and he's like, lamenting, and the human is thinking about not proposing
because he lost the ring.
Because he lost the ring. So the spirit animals go into action, try to get the ring, but none of them can swim and stuff like that. So they have this. They go to the lake, and they figure out that the lake has a spirit, and the spirit of the lake goes, I should keep it. Somebody offered it to me, and they're like, no, but you don't understand. And the lake didn't care about the dude and his proposal, so they had to come up with a reason why they would want this lake spirit would want to help him out. And so I think it's very interesting. I think it's very enchanting kind of a story, whimsical, something you might see. I don't know if I've ever seen a cartoon or anything like, or anime that might be along these lines.
This one reminded me of a game that a good game to play with kids,
right?
Because you can teach them all of these different things about cooperating with each other,
right,
and trying to get stuff done.
And the system isn't that difficult.
Yeah.
And another thing is, what it reminds me of? If there's any cartoon that and this, I don't see a lot of cartoons anymore. It reminds me of like a Winnie the Pooh story, right?
Yes.
Winnie the Pooh always gets into trouble, right? And then his
usually
friends
gets stuck.
And that's true. He does get stuck. But other than getting stuck, he gets into trouble or something happens, and all his friends are trying to help him out.
Yes.
And that's what this reminds me of. A Wind in the Willows. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. That's also very. That was a little bit more a brooding type of a cartoon, but I think that if you mix mash those two together, I think you get a good idea of what kind of stories you can tell, and what they're going after. And I heard, and I don't have the book. I heard the art is really well done. It's this really beautiful, obviously Japanese inspired type of art, and it's really colorful and really vibrant. And I think the cute little animal spirits and stuff are really cool. There's definitely a game of people who just want to tell a story. And one of the biggest complaints about this that I've heard is that you can't really have a long campaign, right? You can't have this
because it's a short story,
right? It's just you're solving simple,
Yeah.
How like the idea of saving this guy's ring or finding this guy's ring. How much of a campaign can you have about that? No, you really can't. But that's not what this game is about. It's about really helping people out in the micro level instead of this macro level.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting.
All of these non-combat games that Saul made me look up and I found very interesting, and I definitely, this one seems like one that would be cool to play, like if you were playing it with kids to try to, or people that just want to solve something and just do it really simple, right?
Yeah.
No,
definitely.
just a story. Who's stealing the eggs,
Right.
or something like that. Primetime adventures that I probably wouldn't. I probably would not participate in
Really?
because I don't know. it would be. It would have to be a story I really wanted to be in to do that. Monster Heart seems pretty interesting, just because you're monsters and
Teenagers.
yeah. I don't even know if I would play that. Depending on, I guess it would depend on who was running it and
Right.
what the story was going to be about.
You wouldn't want to play a primetime adventure like Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
It depends on who I was playing with and what this. I would have to take into consideration lots of things.
Yeah, that's true. I think all of these, they're really focused on storytelling. And if you need dice for initiative and you need dice for seeing detailed combat and stuff and detailed skill resolutions,
This isn't your cup of tea.
these aren't your cup of tea. But I would argue that whether you think it's your cup of tea, I would think just try them. I think you might actually end up enjoying the difference of play style.
I think the closest that we've come is when we played in a Star Trek game with I forget what the guy's name is, but he runs Star Trek games, and he said it's like if you're on the Enterprise, right?
Yeah.
The Next Generation, right? These are the scenes. You're going to do different scenes, and that was the closest thing. I was in a room full of Trekkies, so it was really easy to envision it, right? This is
Yeah, I don't remember a lot of die rolling in that game.
No, there wasn't.
There was a lot of pontificating.
Yes, it was pretty cool.
Yes.
That's what I meant. You would really have to be,
Buy
to
in.
me, you would have to buy into it or really know the kind of show that the people want to do, right?
Right.
Because I wouldn't want to do something that I would be standing there like, okay, this is what I want you to do. And I'm going, well, how would I do that? What would I say? Versus, okay, this is Star Trek. You're acting like you're so-and-so. And then
Right.
you're like, oh, okay.
Well, I remember he actually used characters from the
From the
show.
Next Generation,
Right.
yeah.
So you're playing Guinan, you're playing, and I think I ended up playing Guinan. And
Yes.
I was like, man, how do I play that character? I mean, I saw the character. I've seen the show a little bit, or with you quite a bit, but I'm like, I never really got into what she was all about, and it's hard to play this for me. This, obviously she was very wise. You can live for a long time and all this other stuff, and that's just not me. So I was just like
Ad-libbing.
ad-libbing and trying to say esoteric things and not really solve issues, which I think Guinan does. And then at the very end, something clicks and something fits and it makes sense at the end of the show. But during the show, like, she always says something, you're like, what the hell does that mean? Right? And
Well,
so
you are.
I think that's the most people. Anyway, Golden Sky Stories, Primetime Adventures, and Monster Hearts 2, which is a new one. They're very story-driven games. May not be for everybody, but I think everybody should give them a try.
So there you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
So,
Angeline.
you have a good day.